Hi there crafters, Louise with you today. Welcome along to a Kitaholic Kits April 2024 share. We have got the most fabulous Vicky Bouton papers in this month's kit, and I was instantly inspired by the patterns, but because the patterns can be a little bit overwhelming, it's sometimes hard to get a layout done. But I think this particular collection of papers has a good mix of quite plain backgrounds. So you can see I've started with the stripy one, which is kind of like a notebook page, but it's got these splatter marks on there, and it gives you sort of this plain background to work with. So you can go ahead and sort of get creative with the papers, but you don't get overwhelmed by everything that's got to go on the page. So for me, I'm just using a single photo today for my 12 by 12 layout, purely because I have a bit of an idea in mind. And this particular layout revolves around the distress crayons. Now, distress crayons are something that I've had in my stash for many years. I watched Tim Holtz use these very early on in the piece, and I found them to be quite an interesting product in the way that they can be used in quite a number of different ways. So what I want to show you today is how I often use my crayons, and it gives me a little bit of a different effect than some of the other distressed products. So I decided to focus on this sort of square angular background. I'm having a bit of trouble today getting my words out, but the square on the angles was what sort of inspired this layout, and I wanted to make it a combination of all different pattern papers from the kit. Now, I've measured the squares because I'm going to combine some pattern papers with the original background, and I'm going to chop them all up and make my own background, but in a similar way to that patterned paper. So the squares are 2 by 2, and I initially slice them with my large paper trimmer, and then I pull out my smaller paper trimmer and cut them into squares again, but I end up with them not being quite square, my paper trimmer, because I had multiple pages. I was being a bit lazy and a bit rushed, and I ended up with wonky squares. So off camera I actually go back and fix them and trim them all up and make them the correct size, but I would not recommend trimming them in a big pile like I did in this case. So once I have my squares sorted, off camera I'm going to go ahead and stick down the entire background. So a mixture of these squares that are already on that angular shape with a combination of those patterned squares that I've cut. Now, I haven't completely stuck down all elements of that background. So I've only put just a little nodule of glue in the middle, and that's because later on I know I want to get textural with them. So I want to be able to scrunch up the edges and curve them up and really give them dimension in the finished product. So just a little dab of glue, and then I'm building my cluster for my photo here. The reason I like to do this fairly early on in the piece is so that I have a bit of an idea of how much of the background I need to create. So I don't often create my background and then embellish over the top of it. I like to sort of know what embellishments I'm going to use and what's going to be above my mixed media portion before I actually go and add that. So I'm simply making some elements, adding a few little bits and pieces around my photo. I love the ephemera collection from this month's kit, that Vicky Bouton packet of ephemera. It is so easy to use. Like, you can see that there's a double up of all different kinds of bits and pieces from the kit, and it's so fun just to layer them behind your elements and use little bits and pieces, and it's just so fun to create with. And I almost found it hard just to stop at one or two bits and pieces, and it might have gotten a little out of control, but go with the flow, go with what your gut says in terms of when you're creating. I do also love this packet of thickers. So although the title can be a bit tricky, the letters can be a bit tricky when you look at them because there's no pattern or structure to them, I actually think they mesh really well because they give you similar sort of shapes to your letters, and they're all black, white and gold and silver, but they're not all the same, which is quite interesting. Okay, let's have a look at a mixed media background. Now, when I'm using distress crayons, I like to cover everything in clear or white gesso. The way that the distress crayons work, you can colour with them without gesso, but the colour doesn't spread as far. So when I'm using them, I like to pop down some gesso because it's very hard to explain. The way the colour sits on the page is you can actually move it and manipulate it in different ways by having a gesso background. If you put distress crayon straight onto plain paper, it almost soaks into the paper, so you don't get that ability to move it around very much. And you'll see once my gesso dries and I come back to this that you can actually watch, and I like to just do a bit of smudging with my finger. It's not a hard process. It's purely how you like to use it. If you prefer a paintbrush, by all means use a paintbrush, but there are so many ways to use them. I think they're a great fun product, so different to anything else on the market, and one that I have collected over the years, so I really do like them. Now, off camera, you can see that I've gone through and I've stitched some diagonal stitching. I am going to go around and pop those extra pieces. I left them long like that because I thought I might leave them to overhang, but I end up tucking them around and actually covering them with some tape so that they're nice and secure. So here is that distress crayon process. So the gesso, and you can see it goes on in that sort of dark smudge, and what I'm doing with my finger, and I'm not using any water or anything because I've got that gesso background, I've got time to actually smudge that colour around. And you don't need much because they are quite pigmented. Here's where I come in with a bit of water because the purple was starting to overpower the blue that I had. I didn't want too much purple in there. So you can see that, yes, they're quite pigmented, and what you can do is you can brush them on dry. So like with my finger, I've just smeared them around and popped some colour in the background, and then activate them with water if you want to blend them a little bit further. And in this case, I'm now using my little acrylic stamp block, and I'm going to use the same distress crayon to actually make some splatters. So finally, I'm going to show you with this leftover colour what you can also do with wet distress crayons. So I'm going to grab just a clean piece of paper, and I want to blend these colours sort of in the middle. So I'm using that grey kind of colour, but it tends to blend with the purple and the navy that I've got at the bottom. So try and mix the actual crayon portion so that you haven't got any hard lumps. It's not always possible, but it doesn't really matter either, as long as you've got a majority of colour. And what you'll do is almost like the packaging technique, where you're just going to place either the acrylic block, or in my case, I like to just turn over my sheet of paper, and it will give you some colour that you can smush on the background. And this actually looks kind of cool because I've also got that kind of stamp look in there as well. So I do think this background is kind of neat, and although it makes a bit of a mess, it's really fun to do. So I'm just going to hit that with my heat gun, and trying not to waste any of that extra colour that's lying around there, adding a few more splatters and some borders as well. At the end of this video, you will actually get to see the layout that I created with that background, so that's something quite fun that you can have a look at as well. It is a Dilutions, and that's where I got the name Dilutions when I was doing this voiceover earlier, because I was thinking about that acrylic block and how it's the Dilutions acrylic block, and it's got a lot of different uses. So, all right, now I'd put this aside to let that distress dry, and it was quite overwhelming. I kind of needed to tone it down just a touch, and so I pulled out this stencil and just again with some white gesso on a little makeup pad there, I'm just going to press that through the stencil and sort of tone that colour down a little bit. So you can see that it just kind of, that having that white blends it out into the white gesso in the background, but it blends it out into those background squares as well. And really adding the white, you can add as much or as little as you like. I'm then going to add some white splatter, again, just to tile this in together, because I've got the blue, the purple background, I've got the blue and the purple splatter, so now I've added a layer of white. I'm just going to add a little bit of white splatter as well. Finally, I'm happy with how this looks around the cluster that I've got going on, but I felt that the whole layout needed a border. There was just something about it, I wasn't quite finished, and so I got some black gesso and a pen, and I just, sorry, not a pen, a spatula, and spread some black gesso around. I'm going to scratch up those little bits and pieces to add some texture. I've glued everything down with some tacky glue to make it nice and secure, and that's my layout done. So thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed and you're inspired to give those distress crayons a go. And of course, you've got a bonus layout coming at the end of this video. So thanks for watching.